Hi friends, here I am on YouTube finally. I've been promising you on social media that I'll be giving you guys videos, tutorials on how to use my brushes among other things. Okay, so today I'm going to be talking about how to use my sketchbook set for Procreate. I've been using the Photoshop version a lot lately, that's all I've been using, but I know most of you guys are Procreate users, so I will be giving this demo in Procreate. First things first. A lay of the land of the brushes. This set consists mostly of colored pencils and markers. So there's colored pencil, mid-grain, and then there's small grain. So these three brushes are the same. The only difference is the size of the grain. So colored pencil will have the largest grain size. Let's see, I'll just do this here. So the gaps in between each stroke is the biggest, and so this is great if you really want a textural look or if you work very large. If your canvas size is like over 5,000 pixels, the regular version without mid-grain or small grain probably will be the best for you. And so mid-grain, the gaps are a bit smaller between, so you see that is a pretty big difference there. So it also depends on the look that you want and how you prefer to work. And then small grain is best for very, very fine details. So say you're in a small area, like say I'm in the eye area here and I want to fill it, but I can't because the gaps in the grain are too big, then that is when I would use the small grain. And so every single brush has those three variations. And they're all like, so it's consistent across everyone. So mid-grain, the texture size is the same as the texture size and say this one right here that's labeled mid-grain. So you can keep a consistent look across your work while you're switching brushes, because I know it gets kind of funky if you have different texture sizes and it's not consistent. Like if you're going into the brush settings and changing the grain size yourself, you don't remember what you saved it as. So I made these three kind of templates across the board for all of my colored pencils. Colored pencil, this one, you see as I tilt my pencil, it kind of like changes the size. It's got tilt enabled. So if you prefer that, the way that brush functions, it's very similar to the pencil brush in my pencil pack. So if you like that brush, you will like this one. And so the next one, uniform. I'll delete these. Uniform is the same no matter how you tilt your pen. So it's gonna, it's best for if you want to like hatch in, like just like this, without having to worry about the change in size. So it's gonna be consistent. And then softer, I would classify this brush as more of like a line art brush because the gaps aren't as sharp. So let's go back to colored pencil. You see how sharp that texture is? Like it's almost hard edges. It's almost like pixelated, but the softer brush does not have that hardness. So, oh, I have my opacity down. Let's bring it up. So look at these two compared to each other. This looks almost pixelated and this one is almost blurry. So the softer brush I feel like is best for lines, although some of you might prefer this sharper texture, but the softer one I feel like for me personally is best for line art. So that's what I like to use. And let's see, the rake is great for hair, or if you want to do efficient hatching without having to like repeatedly do strokes. So you can do lots of quick lines. So look, I got hatching there without having to individually do every single little strip. So rake is great for hatching and for hair. And then fill is similar to my fill brushes in my pencil pack. So it's fills in large areas very efficiently. So instead of having to do this for that whole time to fill in that same area, you can do it very quickly with the fill brush. And it does have like a softer edge, so it's almost like you're using a blending stump. So it's like a soft edge blended edge, I want to say. So it's really great for blending as well. I personally love fill brushes. It saves me a lot of time, a lot of hassle. Okay, so now we're getting into the markers. So marker, this one has 2 versions. So this one, here I'll show you the texture. And it kind of pulls like a marker too, like the edges pull a little bit. You can see it kind of gets darker around the edges. This one, if you go over it, you will see a difference in color. So it'll get darker the more you get over it. But there's only, the maximum darkness will be the actual color, your color swatch. So this will only ever get as dark as your color swatch. However, if you use the multiply one, it acts more like a real marker in that you layer over and it just gets darker and darker and darker. So you see how dark that is? That is much darker than your actual color swatch. So if you want to get that cool effect of like overlaying markers, the multiply option is great for that. Okay, and let's go to solid. So solid, it's as it sounds. If you go over it, it doesn't add depth to the color, but it does have that slight faded ink soaking into the paper texture. It does have a hint of that, but it's not very prominent. So if you don't like the effect of having colors layer, then the solid brush is your best bet. And the detailer is for when you want to get into tight spots, you can't get in there with the other ones. Detailer is great for that, like that. Multiply is just like this multiply in that it'll get darker and darker every time you layer. Blending edge is a very, very soft edge. And if you want to bring colors into each other, it'll blend nice, especially if you have light pressure sensitivity with your hand. Like if you go very lightly, it'll very easily almost blend into. There's no like hard lines, like say with this one. Obviously there's a hard line here so you can see the difference. But blending edge, it's a very soft, smooth edge. Edge pooling, here is the edges of it are much darker. So like the water pools at the edges, or I should say ink because it's not water. That's not a good example of color. Let's go like this one. It's very noticeable how dark these edges are. And some people like this effect with markers. I personally do like that look with alcohol markers when it's kind of darker towards the edges. And then blender is best to use with the smudge tool. So if you want to blend out hard edges, and this will come in handy later. I will show you just exactly how I use that. All right, now let's get into the actual demo. One thing I will say first about markers is that it's best to treat these markers like real markers. So I designed these to act like real markers, and so you have to think the exact same way you would with regular markers. And so with regular markers, you always want to work light to dark, because once you put a dark color down, there's no erasing that, there's no lifting that color up. Like that dark color is there. And so when you work with markers, you want to go lightest color to darkest color and layer your colors that way. For this drawing, I think I want to start with markers, show you how I use them, and then I'll go over in colored pencil. I think I will start with this marker to show you how I do it, and pull a color from here. I use this marker, especially the ones that get darker with more layers. These ones I like to color in with a single pass and not lift my pen up off the page. So I will show you what I mean. So if I were to I filled this in and then I lift my pen up and then I do this, you can see that there's this dark overlap, which you can fix if you use the smudge tool. Like you can totally fix that. But for me personally, to avoid having to smudge or to blend, I will fill in that whole area in one single pass. I will not lift my pen up. So I usually zoom out so it's easier for me to see the whole thing. And so I will fill this in. And I actually overshoot. Oops, I held my pen still for too long. So I will overshoot lines. So I'll show you what I mean. Okay, I will purposely miss that area and I will overshoot those other areas. Okay, let's do this. And I think this might actually be too dark of a color to start with. When I say start from light, I mean like very light. You see this area here? If I didn't meet my lines here and I wanted to fill that area, I will smudge and pull down that color to fill it. But generally, I like to overshoot, and then I just like erase those lines. Or erase where I went out of the lines, I should say. So that is my first light layer. This is actually kind of dark for me. I usually go even lighter on my first pass. I actually could, you know what? I could do a curve. Oh no, I did not want that. I wanted my gamma. And lighten it up. Okay, there we go. Lighter. Okay, here we go. And I generally like to work on the same layer with my markers because when they're separate layers, there's no bleeding or overlapping effects. And so in order to get that nice color overlapping look, I do like to work on a single layer. I will start doing shadows here. Okay, I'll pull this color. You can eye drop, you can do a color palette, whatever. For this demo, I'm just as quick as possible. Size this down a little bit. And, ooh, that's kind of dark, but okay. I will fill that in. That is really dark, actually. Let's lighten this up. I almost feel like I need to size my brush down, but that'll work. And then over here, same thing. And these tight areas would be a great time to use the detailer, which I actually might do for this. And then slowly I will overlap colors to build up to my values. So this is a little darker here. Ignore my dog. You'll hear tippy tappies all the time in my videos. So some people love this hard look, like the hard edge, but depending on your style, like maybe you want to blend this in a little more into this, so you can totally do that with the blender and then keep some hard edges. All right, let's see, I'll show you the blending edge brush, how I would use that. Very softly. Blending edge brush is also great for if you want to do a very subtle pass of color. The other ones are very dense, and so like even if you use very light pressure with your hand, it'll still be very dense. But the blending one, you can use light pressure and it'll just like barely apply. Very light pressure. And it's a lot darker up here. And to get that like marker look, I don't use the blending one too much because then everything is soft and it looks airbrushed. So to get that actual marker look, I do still like switch between the hard edge brushes so that it does look genuinely like marker, because that's how marker behaves. The more you airbrush things digitally, the more that they do look digital, because I mean, you do have airbrushing in traditional, but if you want that realistic look of certain mediums like marker, like you have to not use too much airbrushing, which is a beginner mistake that I did a lot when I first started. Try to avoid airbrushing and overblending, unless that's the look you're going for, in which case that's totally cool. But if you want it to look like real traditional mediums, avoid overblending. I will just like build up my values with markers, and debating on leaving, no, I was gonna leave the whites of her eyes, the paper texture color, but they really aren't that bright. I am very careful when I'm butting up next to another color. This would be a great spot for the marker detailer, and I think it needs to be even smaller. And the marker detailer kind of has like a tapered end. It's easy to get into tight areas because it's very sharp. Unlike blunt round, if you just size down the marker one, it's just like blunt and round. But like the detailer is a tapered sharp edge. Actually, I kind of like that brown, so I'm gonna layer one more time. And a trick, if you want something darker but don't want to keep layering over and over, a trick is to duplicate, and so it'll make things significantly darker without you having to go over it again. And then you would just merge down. The only thing with that trick is that it fills in those gaps a bit more than I like, so I do like to keep that grainy paper grain texture look obvious, because that's what makes things look like they're traditional and not digital. Okay, and on to the next. Oh, nope, I want a detailer. And there's quite a bit of like red there. I'm gonna use my detailer to, oh, that's way too red. And let's give you this view too. So this is what it looks like on my screen right now. Actually, let's just get into the colored pencils. So colored pencils. So when I usually do these, I do the marker layer first, and then I do colored pencil over it, because when you're doing colored pencil, it takes forever to fill in. And then you see, if you want the paper color to show through, then I would suggest not using that, the marker, because say like go over this, then the color of the marker will show through. Pencil Uniform is my favorite brush, my colored pencil brush. So I'm gonna start rendering, and actually I will do my colored pencils above my line layer. So I have my line layer, and then underneath it is my markers. So like when I'm doing my markers, I can see where I'm at on my line art. So I'll put it underneath it, and then over the lines, I will use my colored pencils. a note here. This version of the grain, it's not fine enough for me to fill in as much as I'd like. And so I'm going to go to the softer small grain brush. And so this is going to allow me, oops, I need to make it smaller. It's a bit more blunt and soft, so it allows me to do a more solid line without too huge of gaps showing through. Notice that difference. The soft small grain compared to the large not soft grain. Such a huge difference. And technically it's still the same paper texture and everything. It's just softened and the size is much smaller. So you can get a lot of different textural effects mixing these different ones, even though they're still technically the same brush. Like the 3 versions, there's mid grain, small grain, and pencil. They're still technically the same brush, just different grain sizes, but you can still like combine it in a way that gives you such cool effects. So I want to keep this demo short and quick for you guys. So I'm not going to do this whole portrait because honestly, this whole thing would take me at least 8 hours, maybe 10 hours if I'm taking my time and making it exactly like the drawings you see on my social media. I tried to include as much as I could on each brush, but if you do have any questions, let me know in the comments, and I will try to answer any questions that you guys have. But in the meantime, I will continue rendering. Not you too. These dogs. This is Odie. Say hi, Odie. Oops. And so here I went a little too dark, so I'm just going over with the eye white color. And really there's no right or wrong way to use my brushes. This is just how I personally like to use my brushes and how I made them, like the intent that I made them with. But I love seeing the cool ways that you guys use my brushes. Like you guys just make the coolest, unique art and you use the brushes in the way that I personally would like, oh my God, how did you use it? That's crazy to me. So I really love seeing you guys make art with my brushes, and always tag me. I love seeing it. Even if you're tagging me every day, I don't care, tag me. I want to see it. I want to see your art. eye here is not round. It's got like a flat bottom, which I do not want. So I'm just reshaping the pupil here, the iris, I mean. And so this whole process that you saw here is the same exact process I would use for the whole face. But for today's demo, I'm not going to show you that, just to keep this video short and sweet, which I will have speed paints up on my YouTube channel. But my tutorials, I'm going to keep short and sweet and just covering the brushes and not actually like how I draw apart. But there will be videos like that. I do want to document like the whole process from start to finish. And I hope this was helpful to you guys. And let me know what pack I should do next. I'm thinking I want to do Sargent's Oils because it's probably my most requested tutorial of any of my brushes. But let me know what I should do. Thank you so much for tuning in today and have a good day. See you soon.